This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. You know, there's something noble about it, the idea of work. I mean, I love work. Work that is my passion. Work that is my creativity, my soul. Inspiring other people. Waking up every day excited to do something new. Excited to offer a perspective. Perhaps all my time and energy put into my craft can give somebody else a head start, a perspective that they might not otherwise have in what we call trend following trading. But it's tough. There's all kinds of forces that we're up against. And I really view this episode of my podcast, this monologue, as an emotional rescue, so to speak, especially since I think the Chinese stock market was down 6% today. That's a pretty significant move for one day. You do 3 or 4 days of 6% down and you got a little bit of a panic on your hands. And frankly, I think anybody that didn't have a plan is already panicking. They've already reached for a change of underwear, so to speak. 6% down in one day. And imagine those folks that maybe didn't really have a strategy, were perhaps over-leveraged. But let me stay focused on the idea of the working man for a second, because it is a good thing. But the working man title is bad for some people. Because if you put yourself into a position where you're doing work that you don't like, and you're showing up every day to clock in for the man, and you're not into it, your heart's not there, and you're just doing it for the paycheck. Look, I get we all have to go through struggles, tribulations to survive. But you've got to have that goal in mind, that optimism about something more than just punching the clock. Now, one of the things that I'm going to cover a lot of different topics today under the guise of what I call the emotional rescue, because we just don't think about it regularly when it comes to our investing, our money. But emotions that's the understanding. I mean, if you sit down with a guy like Ed Seykota, one of the great trend following teachers of the last 40 years, he's going to discuss emotions. He's going to get right into the heart of the matter. Who are you? How do you feel? How do you look at the world? How do you think? What are your experiences? How have you been shaped? Those come right there alongside with when do you buy and when do you sell? And if you think, let's say your life is utter chaos emotionally, and you're in desperate need of the emotional rescue. If you think you're going to become a trader of success without worrying about the emotional side of the coin, well, that's not going to happen. And, you know, there is something going on in society right now. I've got a bunch of examples that I want to go into. But I want to first just bring up the idea of multitasking. Interesting article I saw recently called "Don't Multitask, Your Brain Will Thank You." And it goes on to say chronic multitasking could be making you less productive. Why? Because your brain is on overload. Well, clearly, anybody and everybody knows that our brains are on overload today. I mean, I'm the first one to admit that I should not be on my iPhone as much as I am. And for those that listen will realize it wasn't but 6 months ago I was probably making fun of those using an iPhone. Now, for international travel, it's been a dream. But I guess that's not really an excuse, but it really has been a dream. I think if I was in one location in the US, it'd be much easier to not use it, and that's why I did it. But on the move, it definitely is a dream. But I want to read a quote from this excerpt on multitasking. It says, the ability to juggle work is a standard job requirement. Researchers have another name for this supposedly desirable skill, however, chronic multitasking. If this sounds more like an affliction than a resume booster, that's because research has shown again and again that the human mind isn't meant to multitask. Even worse, research shows that multitasking can have long-term harmful effects on brain function. Now think about that for a second. You can really, if you follow in my world, when I talk about fundamental analysis, the idea of using all the economic factors and statistics out there and crop reports and oil production and this political that, this Federal Reserve that. What if you could just reduce it all and study multitasking of all the fundamental information, reducing it to something simple to digest? For those that have listened to my podcast, they know where I'm going with that. But multitasking is not a good thing. Let me continue. I'm going to touch on a lot of different topics today that I think you'll see by the end of this podcast. They all kind of thread the needle together. They all connect. But it's not a straight line. Look, my brain doesn't move in a straight line. I just see connections. I see pieces of information that make sense together. And often to establish or reestablish my point, or to, frankly, provide a negative for something that is not so good in my opinion. But I have a really good friend of mine. She writes me the other day. She's a doctor. And she says, and she hasn't written me in a long time, maybe 5 months. And she says, trends are tough to follow right now. Any sage advice? Now, she has a very successful medical practice. Extremely successful. Very bright woman. I mean, she's killing it. But she doesn't have time. And even though we've known each other for years, and she's probably had a chance to go through my book some, it's still in her world, she only has so much time. And so she can listen to her patient, me, talk to her about trend following. But she's got all these other pieces of information hitting her. She's a very successful doctor. She's got financial advisors hitting her. She has the whole buy and hold world on her at all times. So even though we connect and she gets it in conversation, right at the moment when markets, and she just wrote me the other day, right at the moment when markets are starting to kind of get a little jittery feeling, she writes me. Now, of course, for those that know trend following, it's kind of hard to become a trend following trader right at the middle of where chaos might be lurking, right when a black swan might be landing, right when markets start to vomit, so to speak. You got to kind of have the plan in place in advance. But think about it. Why is it hard? Why is it hard for a very smart person like my friend, this doctor? And she is very bright, very successful. I mean, she's killing it. But why is it hard? Well, a great example. So today, in preparation for this podcast, I saw a piece in the Wall Street Journal, poking around, looking for the lovely contradictions. So I saw this excerpt. After 4 bumpy years, the U.S. recovery finally appears to be on a smoother road. Many economists now predict 2014 will be the best year for growth since 2005, while joblessness is expected to click below 7% next year for the first time since 2008. Now, my question wasn't 2005. They're talking about the best year for growth since 2005. That's what they're predicting for 2014. We know what predictions usually amount to. But wasn't 2005 smack in the middle of a real estate bubble engineered by the Fed to paper over the dot-com bubble? Of course it was. So we're now going back in 2013 and talking about what a great year 2005 was when that was the middle of the bubble. I sometimes you just got to laugh. So who wrote this article? I love doing this. I love whenever I see a really crazy piece of writing, invariably, if you look up the author, for someone for like the AP or the Wall Street Journal, usually it's usually like a 26-year-old kid who just got out of journalism school. But this particular Wall Street Journal writer. Her name is Brenda Crane. I'm not picking on Brenda. She's probably a fine woman. But her Wall Street Journal bio, quite fun. It says, quote, she graduated with honors from Georgetown University and is known for her distinctive flair for fiction writing, in parentheses, though certainly not at the Journal, in parentheses. They're telling you her qualifications were a distinctive flair for fiction writing. Then you go back and you wonder, why is it hard for a very successful doctor like my friend, who only has so much time, to get confused, to not see it clearly? Well, if the Wall Street Journal openly tells people that they have writers with a distinctive flair for fiction. Now, of course, the journal and this particular lady could come back and say, hey, you took that out of context. That's not fair. Look, I didn't write it. If you tell me this is an economics reporter and you list her bio as having a distinctive flair for fiction, frankly, I was thinking about it. I don't even have to comment that much. But once again, this just outlines, not only is it that I'm just picking on her because her bio says this, but the fiction is that 2005 was some wonderful year. It was in the middle of the bubble. So it actually is fiction. It actually is fiction. So I was thinking, all these fun excerpts out there, like how do you approach this? Like how did I approach getting inside trend following? So getting back to this idea of emotional investing, you can see, and I use my friend the doctor as an example of confusion. You can see multitasking is messing us up. And you can see that there's got to be a new way of looking at things, a new way of thinking about how do we get to this emotional rescue? The emotional rescue, frankly, just so we can be solvent, so we can make money. We can have some freedom. So another article from the Wall Street Journal, not to only pick on the Wall Street Journal for the reporter with the distinctive flair for fiction, but they do have some good pieces in there as well. This piece caught my eye. The cold truth about emotional investing. New research shows that even the pros invest more from the heart than from logic. It goes on to say, a very important insight in emotional finance is the concept of the fantastic object. It's like Aladdin's lamp, which you polish and can have anything you want. In unconscious terms, this is ultimately what we're all looking for. The whole environment is problematic because fund managers are expected to outperform on a continuous basis in competition with other equally able and well-resourced managers. And of course, not everyone can do this. So actually, the fund managers are required to be fantastic objects to earn continuous superior returns at low risk. This, of course, is only possible in fantasy, not reality. To be able to do this, fund managers have to be able to believe they can find fantastic objects themselves, stocks with which they can have a special relationship and which are going to outperform with minimal risk. Look, no risk, no reward. Risk is two sides of the coin. If you want to make above average returns, you will take above average risk. That's the way the game works. But this fantastic object, think about the people that come out there and profess their love for some stock. You know, they know everything about it. There's the great example that I've seen recently is the guy that loved this one fast food restaurant because he went in there and he watched people at the cashier's line and he saw something, or at least he thought he saw something, and how they were buying food. Now, the best thing you could do if you were really interested in that fast food company would be to have a plan to buy and sell the stock in a systematic way, not to just assume that if you observed a line of people ordering, nachos and chicken wings, that somehow or another that would correlate to you making profit. I want to play one more clip here really quick. This is from NPR. This also goes into the idea of emotional investing.
We all know these investors, and perhaps you're among them. People who obsessively check their portfolios. People who buy when they should sell and sell when they should buy. People who follow the pack on Wall Street, even when it leads them over a cliff.
The big question is why?
Why do we as investors often make the wrong decisions? In this series, we'll look at the evidence to understand how emotions, psychology, even the wiring in our brains affect our financial decision making. Welcome to Your Mind and Your Money. September 2008. Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt. Stocks tank. The global financial system seems on the verge of collapse. Fast forward 1 year. Investor Susan Abrams sits calmly in her living room. The market has finally begun to recover. But she remembers the pit in her stomach during the crash, as her portfolio dropped nearly 30%.
I'm not a suicidal person, but yeah, it did affect me.
Susan was not alone. Countless investors watched a lifetime of savings vanish. Panic was in the air.
Some who were probably on their roofs, I was not on the roof. I did get nervous.
Standard economics assumes that people are cool, calm, and collected. They make logical decisions to maximize their wealth. Princeton psychologist Daniel Kahneman turned that idea on its head. He found that in matters involving risk, people are anything but rational. His work won him a Nobel Prize.
If you ask, say, Princeton students, how about a gamble where if it shows tails, you lose $10. If it shows heads, you win X dollars. What would X have to be before you like the gamble, before you're willing to take it? They'll want $25. You can do the same thing with their parents and talk of $1,000 or $10,000, and you'll get roughly the same ratio. So that's a very fundamental fact about people, that they're loss averse.
That trait, loss aversion, leads people to shy away from good bets. Susan Abrams says that happened to her. After the market crash, her emotions said hunker down. She chose to stay out of the market.
I still was nervous,
MRI brain scans have taken Dr. Kahneman's insights one step further. Dr. Jonathan Cohen is a brain scientist at Princeton University. He and others have found evidence that emotional mechanisms like loss aversion are hardwired in our brains.
Our brains have different kinds of mechanisms, some of which are sort of holdovers from prior times and may still be very useful. With those different mechanisms that serve different sorts of needs, you have the potential for conflict. And it's that conflict between these different mechanisms that may explain our erratic and sometimes seemingly irrational behavior.
So if irrational behavior has its roots in the evolution of the brain, how can we overcome our emotions and make sensible investment decisions? Robert Frick of Kiplinger's Personal Finance says advanced planning can help.
Well, just recognizing that you're hardwired to do things poorly is a huge step, because most people won't admit that to themselves. And then what you need to think of is, when I'm in a time of crisis, I'm going to make bad decisions. So I'll do my planning before a time of crisis.
Abrams says once she realized how her emotions were influencing her investing, she was better able to manage them.
I'm not as crazy as I was, no.
In recent years, researchers have begun to unravel the complex connections between your mind and your money. In this series, we'll search for cutting-edge insights that will help make you into a better investor. Dan Gretsch, Nightly Business Report, Princeton, New Jersey.
Now, not to get too academic, you ultimately have to put this in place. You ultimately have to have a way, once you have this understanding that we're facing this multitasking hell, that we're all connected to these devices, we need a way to decipher the hieroglyphics of the market, a way to decipher all this competing information. Because my friend the doctor is not the only confused person out there. There's a lot of people out there that are confused. They're looking for a new way, a formula, a technique, a system, a process, something that can excite them and give them confidence that they don't have to be able to predict tomorrow. They don't have to trust that some reporter who is touting her distinctive flair for fiction writing is going to be their source of how they have to invest. Now, as I've been touring Asia this spring and early summer, I was giving a presentation to probably 40 plus audiences. We're talking the largest mutual funds, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, in their offices often. A couple big speeches in there as well, but mostly in their offices. And I have a presentation that I was giving Now, most of these managers were not trend following traders, so they were there to learn something new. And very smart people, right? The flow gets back to how do you avoid the distraction? Because mind you, my friend was writing me as markets were melting down. Well, markets melting down are only bad if you're long. If you have a flow mentality like Bruce Lee just described, so what? So what if markets are going down? You're either out or you're short. Who cares? I repeat, who cares if markets are going down? Markets going down are only bad if you're only betting for them to go up. Not everybody is betting for markets to only go up. The wise people are saying, let me go with the flow. Let me go with the flow. But my Asian audiences just love that. And I think it's because, you get a white guy, me, there, teaching, showing trend following. And to play that clip, I think it's an instant icebreaker. People just love it. And I'm not catering or just kind of playing a Homer clip. I love the clip myself. It's awesome. I think most people love it regardless of where you live. America, Europe, South America, Asia. I don't think it makes a difference. However, since Bruce Lee is of Chinese ancestry, I think there's a special connection for people over here. So it's a fun clip. And it's great. It's the truth. So, and look, there's a lot of different places where you can go to find your trend following education. It's not, you need, once you say, hey, I'm going to accept this Bruce Lee way of thinking. This is my way to avoid distraction, to avoid multitasking, to kind of get a handle on the emotional aspect of investing. Then what? Well, you need a system, you need a process, you need rules that tell you when to buy and sell, how you're going to select your portfolio, what is going to be your system for betting your limited capital. That wasn't the topic of today's podcast, and there's a lot of different sources, my books included, my training. There's a lot of different ways you can go. But let's assume for a second you get to the point where you've made the trend following success. You've kind of hit it. You get it. Now what? Now, here's something to keep in mind. Even if you get the monetary success, what are you going to do? Just buy stuff? Buy cars? Buy houses? Interesting article called Buy, Buy, Love in The Economist. A lot of academic research about this. Behavioral research is showing that the most rewarding ways to spend money are counterintuitive. Fantasies of great wealth often involve visions of fancy cars, palatial homes, or remote bluffs. Yet, satisfaction with these material purchases wears off quickly. What was once exciting and new becomes old hat. Remorse creeps in. It's far better to spend money on experiences, like interesting trips, unique meals, or even going to the cinema. This is the kind of thought process. You see, it never stops. It never stops in terms of the mental side of the equation, the emotional side of the equation. You always have to be thinking about it. And it's always about that kind of aha moment where you kind of look up and you all of a sudden feel like Jake Blues and the Blues Brothers, and you look up and the clouds are parting.
Do you see the light? What light? Have you seen the light? Yes! Yes! Jesus H. Goddamn Christ! I have seen the light!
Yeah, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong getting a little Jake Blues in to make the point. Do you see the light? Have you seen the light? Oh, come on. I know a lot. Look, some people will listen to this podcast and be like, this guy Covel, he's just rambling around. He's not making any sense. He's not telling me what to do. I'm unhappy. I'm bitter. I didn't get it handed to me on a silver platter. Wine, 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 wine. Next. Now let me go back to CNBC and somebody will tell me what I want to hear. Oh, awesome, awesome. That guy Covel, he's a jerk. He didn't tell me anything. Kind of have one of these, Covel vomit sessions or something. I will never provide any useful perspective. I will never provide any emotional rescue to someone who's coming at it from that perspective. If you don't think about the things that I'm talking about in this podcast, go back and look at the articles, look at the full clips, look at the research behind what I'm talking about. Read more about trend following. Yeah, I'm making it. I'm giving this in a kind of a digestible form. But there's lots of pieces to grasp onto here. It is all about your terribly important emotional rescue. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.